Now, as you can see here from my screen, we're going to be taking through a load of items, and to start obviously at the start. And the main thing that we're looking at here is to try and ensure that you get some really, really good practice. Now, myself, my name is Leon, and I am a former head teacher of an outstanding school. And our focus today is to be able to work with you and teach online, to give you some advice and to give you some tidbits in how you can actually develop and progress that. Now, the key way that we're going to work here is in this slide that's mentioned and shown here. And we're going to be looking to maximize the time that we're actually working with you so we can deliver stuff that is really, really potent and important. Please drop any texts or questions in the chat. And just to know, this is a supported webinar. As you just saw from the beginning there, my colleague Blair is with me, and we are going to be able to do different items. And we've got a two-part introduction to any of the slides that you see. Now, as you go through them, you might be able to see just over on the left, you've got some of the items that are in white and blue. You might just see them in the precursor nav over on the left just here. And that's some of the items that we're going to go through. Good practice, and which we'll cover now, and then some extension practice that we will follow with later on. Now, my background covers a range of different items. Like I said, I've always been in education. Luckily, former head teacher of an outstanding school. Had a range of YouTube channels that we're actually always working on. And on top of that, we've taught now 280,000 students online and 8,000 teachers. So we have a lot of different experience in delivering items online and supporting people's online. So please feel free to drop any questions in at any time. And obviously, if anyone else comes in, we'll be able to drag and help them as well. Now, the first thing we want to think about in this period is you as a teacher. Now, when you're starting to try and transition some of your practice online, it's really, really important to note and think about what you were like when you started. You also want to think about the current climate. There's a lot of change going on at the moment. So there's things that are going to be a lot more relevant now than they were, say, even a few weeks or months ago. Now, thinking back to your classroom practice, it's really important to think as you're moving from one to the other is, what was your classroom practice like? Or what was the way that you taught online? What did you rely on? What were some of the key things that you would use as props or support within your class? And you also want to think about what your guiding principle was, like how you put yourself in a position where you might actually benefit, how you put yourself in a position where you would then reach the children, and what you believed. Did you think that you had to earn the respect of the students before you could teach them? Did you think that kids should have just behaved and listened to you? Or did you think that your children in the class or the learners that you were in charge of, they were partners in the learning somehow? They were working with you towards a common goal. Now, you and your experiences are going to shape a lot of the way that you deliver online for the first time. Now, it's really, really key to remember that, and that's in that bottom section there, and excuse it for being slightly blue in colour. You and your experience are basically set through an institution, education institution, and you're meeting an educational construct. Now, that construct is an idea that we all go to school, or a lot of students go to school, and then they are prepared to learn in a certain way. Now, you have to remember how key that is, because when we're moving into the situation where we're changing almost everything, those key items aren't there. So your core principles, they may change. What's your guiding principle now? It might change. But more than anything, the structure and the framework in which you gave your previous learning or previous delivery is also going to change. You once had a student who was completely prepared to actually learn within the confines and the framework of the school. And now, obviously, it's very, very different. So just remember that whole paradigm shift is happening. You're taking away the safety net of the institution, and you're moving on to something that's a lot more, like a brave new world, if you will. Now, there's some underlying concepts to think about when you're looking at online delivery. I would say, much like anything else, you have to have really sound principles. You have to know the basis of what you're doing and where you're starting from. And the philosophy or the idea here, when we say, when especially in different leadership groups, when you're saying that you want to improve a school or improve an outcome or improve a lesson, and if I just use the educational terms, and I hope they're relevant to everyone watching, you tighten to good, and then you loosen to outstanding. Now, what that really means is you try and build a very solid base. So get the basics right. So in the second half of this tutorial, where I'm actually going to be going through some of the best practice or some items that you can use and think about, it's really important to think if you get that right from the start or as a basis, it's going to allow you to really develop, push, and move on. In this stage, and as you're doing, remember as well that 7 out of 10 is good enough. We're not looking, or you shouldn't be looking, to try and get anything perfect first time. And obviously I'm going to explain that in a little more detail as we go through. But I'm also going to make a big point of saying that online, you need to think of yourself as an extension, and you need to think of the online world in front of you as an extension. So what will you replicate that was in the classroom that you want to put online? But moreover, on top of that, what kind of practices or tools will allow you to change everything? Now, this is one of the beautiful things about online learning, or online delivery, should I say, in the first instance, because you have, say in a classroom, you would have had a situation where you have your coloured pens, you have some workbooks, you maybe have an interactive screen, you have an OHP. There's 5 or 6 tropes around what you do that you can really repeat and use again and again and again. Because of the tools available to online, there are absolutely hundreds of different things that you can follow through and work with in different ways. And it's really, really important to know and to be sure that you are looking to try different things in this early phase. And you're trying to find maybe anywhere between 5 and 10 good bits of practice that you can stick your learning on and around. Maybe 5 or 10, and we'll come to it more. Now, I'm going to pause there for a second, simply to allow you just to reflect on the items. And I'd just like to share just with the people watching, if you could just input a key takeaway or a key comment that you've thought so far, something that gets you thinking about your practice, or something that you might want to implement. And this could be a range of items, from thinking about the paradigm shift. It could be actually thinking about the guiding principle you once had. Now, in our current phase, and this is happening all around the world, just remember it's really good contextually, we are replicating, we're not innovating. We're taking what was happening in schools and we're basically trying to put that online, which is very, very natural. It's a knee-jerk, an access-first kind of consideration, and we're not really in a position where we can innovate yet, because we're still learning the territory. You're going down to assess the ground before you can start to think, well, what kind of funky building can I build on it? So really, you've come over a gateway and a threshold, and it's not the time to worry about perfection. You're really looking at more and more and more what the innovation is going to lay in store, and you just need the tool. It's much more a case of that old cliche of being able to walk before you get into a situation you can run. Now, luckily, as I've noted at the bottom here, the UK is not focused on judging at all in any way, shape or form. And so this is also a real opportunity for you to develop new practices and to be able to lead on something. And that's one of the things I really like about online learning. It's a great leveler at the moment. And one of the key points there that I'm going to touch upon as well is it's much easier at the moment to test new ideas. Now, think about that for a second. As a teacher, when you're sometimes walking along on the weekend and you're thinking about different things, and then you see something that gives you inspiration, you're like, oh, I'd love to try that in a lesson, and how would I garner it into a lesson, shape it and place it? Well, with the online world, one of the key things that's really, really important is you don't have to do that. You can test a new tool, or you can test a new idea very quickly through this medium, through something like Zoom or Hangouts or a webinar. And you can test it very readily on an unsuspecting audience of anyone. So I've been actually testing different items out for a long time, and I generally test them with some colleagues. So I'll say, how are we doing this? What would we do this? How would we do it in different things? So it gives you a lot of experience and space to try new and different things. Now, there are some real drawbacks to learning online, and I think it's really, really important. Now, you miss out on the energy give and take. When you're in a classroom and everything's very bubbling to the surface, there's a lot of energy coming through, there's a lot of passion coming through, you're distanced from that straight away. You also have to remember that you are hijacking a medium that was more interesting without you. Now, what I mean by that, and obviously the second point I have there is also tied into it, screens are generally used by students for mainly entertainment than they are for education. So if you think about that, and you think about that with your delivery as well, and the attitude and approach that you have it, whether you're coming across on a phone or whether you're coming across on a screen, students are normally used to looking at those in movies, games, TikTok, YouTube, which are all very highly curated to keep engagement. So you have to remember that's something that you are competing with in the first instance, and you are second to that medium. In much the same way that it's, if you've ever had a performer come and have a performance on the school assembly, on the hall, it just feels slightly out of place because it's not the same as actually having it when they're in a concert or something of the like. But in a situation now where you're in the, where you've moved on to their world, onto that screen, you have to remember that that's where you are. You are starting on a second footing to where a lot of the other online learning items have come from, or sorry, the online presentation items have come from. But while we're thinking about that, it's also really important to remember that it's not all just about learning. It's huge, especially during this lockdown period. It's really, really important to think about the continuity you're giving your students. Some are just going to be so happy to see your face, to maybe hear your voice, to hear that trademark that you do. You're also giving the students a lot of hope in the instance as well. You know, they think that there's still a connection and someone cares as well. And I actually can't touch upon that well connection. If you're doing online lessons where you're connecting students and you've got 30 students, sometimes it's just nice to see other people and to know that they're in the same situation as you. So think about those soft engagement tools and how things are actually. Now I want to talk a very little bit as well about the actual practice and implementation. Now, in the last 10 minutes of this, we'll just think about some of the actual tips, techniques, and ways that we can use. I hope that what I've talked about so far has given you a good kind of basis and understanding of some of the precepts around how we're thinking about changing online learning and why it's become different, why it's become a lot more important at this time. But this next section here is really about implementation. What are we going to do and how are we going to do it? Now, you have to remember that on an online space, or in an online space, should I say, just like you're in a classroom, you are trying to manage a unit of time, and you are trying to control the understanding that's taken in, and you're trying to extend the opportunity and range. Now, this can mean lots of different things. First of all, I would say that one of the key things of it is you are able to extend the world far beyond the computer screen. And it's really, really important to do that by clicking on different links, showing different pages, showing different examples of where you can be on loads of different tools, and we'll look at some of those shortly. It's also really, really important to remember that you've still got to remain and contain control of the space. So what are you going to use to engage different students to make sure that they're on the same page and that they're with you? Another item to think about, and this is probably one of the key things for actual delivering online. In a classroom, I think subject knowledge is the main vehicle that we use to drive forward and to assist and support the learning of children. We use the classroom knowledge. Online, one thing that you'll find is that an online tool can completely drive and shape the way that information is taken. And then ultimately on top of that, it's really, really important to note that those tools can actually shape the entire learning structure of what you want to deliver. So you will change what you teach based on how well a tool is responded to. And hopefully we'll touch upon some examples on how that can happen. The basis of online learning, though, it doesn't change. You're not suddenly going to be doing something that you never did in class. You're going to be taking best principles from what you did in class, and you're going to be using them. So here I've kind of highlighted that for us, where I'm actually saying that we have the elements where we're looking at how we might develop a starter, and then we'll recap to something, we'll deliver something, then we'll actually have tasks, forgive me for the misspell there, then we'll look to reflect, again, deliver on or after our reflection, then have another task, and then again, we'll invite ourselves to reflect. So there's lots of opportunities there where we want to make sure that we're still keeping that teaching and learning cycle going. You're just going to do it in different ideas. And in the next slide, I'll talk about how you might do that differently if you're doing it live and asynchronous, because it is worth noting and remembering as well. Now, I'd also invite you to remember that your students have a portal and a space that is completely relevant or linked to your screen. So your screen for this period is their world. And try to remember it, or try to think about it as the be-all and end-all. Don't expect students to have X, Y, or Z at home and iPhones and iPads and visualizers and different things. Just expect them to be able to see for a screen and try and make as much for them as you possibly can. Now, this slide, and obviously if you are watching on a device that is a computer rather than your phone, I would highly recommend trying to take a screenshot of this, and we will be sharing things afterwards with the attendees, but this is really quite important. Now, the ways that you teach are going to be quite different here. The next item that I want to talk about here is how we look at things differently depending on what we are teaching or how we are teaching. Now, you have to remember that every single element is going to have a slightly different feel to it. Now, the live opportunity, we're going to teach in one way. The live one-to-one opportunity, we're going to teach in another way. And then the asynchronous items as well, we're going to teach in a different way again. Now, the most important things with this is to remember that if you deliver them all the same, you're not doing anything wrong, but they just naturally lend themselves to other items. Now, asynchronous basically means that it's not in time. So you are leaving some training or leaving some learning for people to do. Yeah, homework is basically asynchronous. I give you something, you're going to do it away from me, and that's how that works. Now, when you're doing group training, it's really important to try and appeal to people because you haven't got the same chance to go with depth. And so to try and make sure that everyone's centered around something, you do a variety of items to try and make sure that you have their senses engaged, try and get them thinking about different things. Another item to try and think about in the live group lessons is to think about what kind of action or drama you can bring to things. Now, I don't necessarily mean getting up and doing a play stage, but if I was to do this, if I turn my screen share off, and then let's turn my camera off and then turn it back on. And then where you can see me again, just making things move and making things change. So now I'm going to turn my screen share back on. And then it's the way that I really kind of move and maneuver around to different things. So you want to make sure that there's some drama, there's something that's interesting, something happening. You don't really have to do that with one-to-one sessions because the natural relationship of one-to-one allows you to be more in-depth. So if I'm going to go here, small things like even moving something around the screen, it's just kind of like just grabbing attention. Now, why do we do this? Why do we know it works? Well, music videos. If you think of a music video and how it's edited and structured, bringing that drama or action to anything just helps it chop and change. And that's why at times I've been changing from different screens and also just, very casually using a item to draw around or draw up, etc. It just gets the brain to focus. Now, this is not a conscious support. This is millions of years of evolution. Something moving could be a danger, so the brain pays it more attention. And then you can use that in your online learning to really, really help. Now, another really important part of actually helping with the live learning is to try and foster a togetherness if you're in a group. So as I've been saying here, sharing people's comments, or if you're in a situation where you're asking people to type different answers to you, try and foster a togetherness to make sure that people understand what's what. And also that it does in the next one, have an interest in others' activity. So when I've actually highlighted names there to say, thank you, Samantha, thank you, David, thank you, Blair, and we've been sharing the different items, what I'm trying to actually have is, well, who answered what, essentially. And so we're sharing that little bit of support amongst ourselves. And then the last part there with group teaching, or group sharing, or group learning online is to try and follow some asynchronous steps. And the asynchronous steps I'll come to in just a moment. Now, when we're doing one-to-one, it's a much longer segmentation. So you would quickly move in and out of items in a group just to keep the engagement and the pace going. But with one-to-one, you can go into longer segments, and then you can have much more what I call active sharing. Now, active sharing would be, for example, if I said to someone, okay, now share your screen. Okay, now you type on the live document with me. And that's much more active. And I'd be looking for deeper and more accomplished pieces from that student from where we go. The basic item with the one-to-one as well is you can go deeper, whereas in a group, it's hard to go deeper because you haven't got everyone on the same page. You can't tell in the same way that you can in the classroom. I've tried this sometimes and you just see people glaze over in different ways. So I would really recommend trying to take an opportunity to go deeper into what you were doing if you are doing one-to-one, and give constant feedback. So make sure that the one feedback that you're giving is developing in some way above what you gave last time, and that you're giving a slight more relevance. So you're helping that person progress and develop. Now, the last item on this list when we're thinking about it here is the asynchronous feedback. Now, this is, I think, best done with video. Now, video introductions are very, very easy. It's much easier to do. If I share my screen again, I'm going to show you to a very popular website, and here, Loom. And so I'll just share my screen to that item. Now, Loom is a wonderful item that will allow you to share. I just remembered that they didn't actually have their own tutorial for a while. Sorry, they didn't actually have their own website for a while. But so I've just typed in an incorrect, or an old one, should I say. And I'll just show you this. Now, Loom is a screen recording piece of software, and here's one of my items, where you can actually just record the screen straight away. So if you go and type in Loom as a Google Chrome extension, it will come up here in the top corner, and it's something that you're able to use to give very quick, short, sharp introductions to a range of items. Now, Loom is fantastic, and you see here I can just record, probably in this bottom three that you can see here, recording my screen and actually showing those items. It's really, really, really useful to actually get that across and share at any point with anyone and anything. So you can make a very quick video instruction on whatever you're doing. Now, the second item that we're going to talk about there is three-step clarity. And what this means is please make sure that you're giving no more than 3 steps in anything you want them to do without you. It's the same as what homework was. If you give too much, it's going to be very difficult. So this is the task. I'm expecting this by then. whatever those three things are, and doing it in video where they can just replay and kind of pick up nuances is so easy. It takes you 30 seconds and it's much quicker than actually typing. Now, you need to also be very clear on the asynchronous items. When are they going to get feedback? In these lessons, you can get soft feedback, which is going to help. But here, if you're leaving something for them, they need to know, especially if you're teaching remotely, when are they going to hear from you? What are they going to be hearing from you? It's really, really important to make sure that's clear for them. And the last item there is to mention a group or to have a group connection in your summary. So they want to understand why, if they've done something asynchronously, how's the rest of the class performed? What has the rest of the class been thinking about? How they combine those things together. So again, that's important to make sure that you're still showing that they're linked to the wider whole, because they're going to feel at times isolated and alone. Now, the next elements that we're going to focus on are some of the basic housekeeping. Now, this is super, super important to keep yourself safe. And I'll give you an example from my own screen. Now, if I was to change my screen sharing now, and I will pick my entire screen. So now you'll be able to see everything on my desktop. And what you'll see there, even if hopefully on this screen now you're seeing the PowerPoint, yes you are. You're seeing my PowerPoint, which is what I've been going through with you, but now you can see all these different items here, screenshots that I've had of different items. You can see the top here where you know what I'm looking at, different items. You can see other things that I've had open. And you also, if I scroll down here, you can see all my applications. So you have to be very, very careful, and that's a really safe part of housekeeping that you need to make sure that you're aware of. I would sign in as a second user on my computer. So when you're actually up in here and you choose to log in as, safe space or something like that, to make sure that you've got that up and ready and used as you're prepared to teach online. Otherwise, you are really opening a can of worms for yourself. Make sure that you've got that space readied and protected. The next item that I want to talk about is going to be some of the key skills. Now, a huge and important thing is to be able to switch screens, as you've just seen me doing, going from different items. Sometimes I've gone to my help desktop, sometimes I've gone to different applications. It's also important to note as well, as you can see there, how to mute people. If you're using something that has those faculties or facilities, I think it's really, really important that you're able to do that with ease, to be able to mute and unmute the students where you can. Some tools allow you to do this with ease, some can make them a lot harder. I also think one of the key skills to be able to do is to use a free whiteboard. So obviously this is a paid service here, but it just allows me in this instance to actually turn on to do different things to engage people. Now, a good free one, and I'll just share you that with a moment. In fact, I'll share it with you straight after this, because it's going to be my next, it's going to be one of the next things I talk about. But having a whiteboard where you can express yourself, relying just on your face, is going to be something that obviously can be done, but I wouldn't recommend it, because sometimes you're going to want that extension in there for yourself. So the item that I would recommend using straight afterwards, again, in the essential backbone of what you're doing, is some of these items here. I've touched upon Loom, and another key item is a live document. So if I was to go to this, so again, just coming round to those items, we'll be looking at, Blair will join that in a second to think about how we can do it. And then one of the other items that's really, really important here, hopefully where you can still see my screen, is being able to use this really, really, it's one of the ones that you'd say it's an oldie, but a goodie. Or we're in a situation where we can focus on the entirety of the screen again, and really, really useful online tools. If you look at classroomtools.net. Now, Classroom Tools is really great because it just has a lot of free, easy engagement stuff. It looks terrible, but there's so much good stuff on here. You can have a countdown to the work that you're doing. You can have a QR generator, which you can share with your students. You can make up word searches really, really quickly if you want to use them as the start of a lesson, and things such as this. It's a really good way to start, and even here it makes moving text scrollers for answering. I know it's very, very basic, but it's very, very useful as well. Now, the second of the items that I would show you here is this one, which is the spongyelephant.com primary schools. Now, I'll put that in the chat for you both, just in case you want them. In fact, I'll put both of them in the chat for you, so they'll be of relevance. So I'll share that there, and I'll take Classroom Tool as well, so you can copy them both if they feel that will actually assist or aid your practice. And then you'll have those there. And essentially what the second one does is this is a great gateway to having lots of different tools. And this is why I mentioned the whiteboard earlier. Here you'll see it has different links that you can do for free, and different items that you can and different items that you can focus on with assisting to actually have your own whiteboard or your own items in those ways. So there's dozens and dozens of online tools here. But I hope in what we've actually shown you so far, you have an idea of, there you can see Blair's joined us now and he's actually highlighting items and he can actually write to me on that doc, etc. And that's a great way to work with different ideas. Oh, we just had a little bit of a logo, it's jumped all over things there. Now, we will send you a follow-up extension to some of these and we'll give you some ideas on how other things work. And sorry, that one's got a little bit away from us there. Yeah, just as we wrap up now, we've just gone slightly over the half hour, and I hope that was okay with you. If you'd just like to actually share your thoughts, just one or two things that you feel you benefited from in this, it would obviously be really, really interesting for us with feedback. Okay, well, thank you very much for your time. I hope the links were of use. We will provide a secondary version of this to you both in some way. And yeah, I hope it was a benefit and I wish you all the best with your online learning. Thank you.